Good evening, I'm Maciej Mikos and you're watching World News Tonight, live from Warsaw. Russia ramps up tensions on NATO's eastern flank after its jet violates Estonian airspace to surveil one of Moscow's shadow fleet tankers. We'll have more on that in a moment, but first let's take a look at the latest headlines. Peace talks in Istanbul fall flat. Neither Trump, Zelensky nor Putin to attend the negotiations. Hungary's ruling party wants to introduce a law against foreign-funded NGOs. And Poland is now the fastest-growing economy in the EU. Tensions are rising on NATO's eastern flank after a Russian fighter jet violated Estonia's airspace. The aircraft was reportedly surveilling a military operation, intercepting one of Moscow's shadow fleet tankers. The incident took place while the EU is working on the 17th sanctions package aimed to counter Russia's shadow fleet activities. Kazimierz Rysiak has this story.
In the Gulf of Finland, a dramatic situation unfolds.
Follow my instructions. Alter your course.
An unflagged oil tanker, suspected of being part of the Russian shadow fleet, gets intercepted by the Estonian Navy.
This is Estonian warship, Papa 67.
Despite these calls, the tanker refuses to answer. Moments later, a fighter jet appears overhead. But it's not Estonian.
Russian Federation sent a fighter jet to check the situation. And this fighter jet violated the NATO territory, close to 1 minute.
The entire situation took place on Tuesday, but the video circulating on social media is now adding gravity to the incident. TVP World cannot independently verify the footage at this time. But whether the video itself is real or not, the incident is as real as it gets. And it's seen by top Western officials as a major escalation from Russia.
This is something very new. So we need to understand that Russia has officially tied and connected itself to Russian shadow fleet.
This has indeed been the first time that a Russian fighter jet intervened during the interception of a shadow fleet tanker. The infamous shadow fleet consists of old decommissioned ships used by Moscow to circumvent Western sanctions and sell restricted goods like oil. This is done through a number of deceptive tactics, like switching off transponders, ship-to-ship cargo transfers and more.
This is why we are active in this region collectively, of course, Estonia and the other nations on the Baltic Sea, but also as NATO collectively making sure we keep this part of NATO territory safe.
In an exclusive interview for TVP World, the Swedish Defense Minister said these hybrid operations are exactly the reason behind Europe beefing up its defense spending.
Of course, we look to the excellent Polish leadership, of course, being the best in Europe when it comes to Article 3 work and beefing up the armed forces. And this is absolutely necessary. And we do this in order to strengthen NATO's capability to defend and deter. And we do that, of course, to make sure that there will not be any confusion on the Russian side in regards to our determination to uphold the Swedish territorial integrity and our allies' territorial integrity.
Poland is spending 4.7% of its GDP on defense, the highest percentage in all of NATO. Other Baltic states are now following its example, and the government in Warsaw is not surprised.
Security in Europe is unevenly distributed, and not by coincidence. The closer you are to Russia, the more you spend.
This latest Russian provocation on the Baltic Sea came as the European Union was in the middle of adopting its latest sanctions package, aimed specifically at the infamous shadow fleet. For TVP World, I'm Kazimierz Rysiak.
Nothing's going to happen until Putin and I get together, says US President Donald Trump on the progress of peace talks over Ukraine. What had the potential to be a breakthrough moment in negotiations has become a future low-level meeting between Kyiv's and Moscow's officials in Istanbul. We're going now live to our correspondent in Turkey, Alex Kadier. Good evening, Alex. So, do we know any details of the first meeting between Ukrainians and Russians since 2022, and will it take place today?
Well, good evening from the very heart of Istanbul. We are stood exactly between the Asian and European continents, and for a brief moment earlier we thought we might be standing on the verge of history with a potential direct meeting between Vladimir Putin and President Zelensky of Ukraine. Those hopes, of course, slashed when Vladimir Putin did not come, instead sending a presidential advisor and some junior ministers here to Istanbul to engage in the first direct talks, as you said it, since Russia's full-scale invasion in 2022. Now, we understand those talks will start tomorrow. They will start Friday. We understand that Secretary of State of the United States, Marco Rubio, will travel to Istanbul to meet with his Turkish counterpart, Hakan Fidan, the Foreign Minister of Turkey. He will also meet, Marco Rubio, with the Ukrainian delegation. The Foreign Minister of Turkey will also himself meet with the Russian side. We will see how these talks unfold, but certainly there is skepticism from the Ukrainian side and from the United States as to how productive they will be. We heard from President Zelensky himself a little earlier today about that. Let's have a listen to what he had to say.
Everybody sees it, the US sees it, and Turkey sees it. The Russians must demonstrate a willingness to negotiate, either through the high level of the delegations, the leaders involved, or the decisions made. If they do not demonstrate that, then there is no readiness to talk about the end of the war and making necessary choices. That shows that there's a lack of political will, which means that Russia doesn't feel that it must end the war. And that means there is no political, economic, or other types of pressure on the Russian Federation.
Well, Marco Rubio also adding that he does not have high hopes for these talks. He said that only Vladimir Putin and Donald Trump meeting could break a deadlock in these talks. We have seen an effort made by Ukraine, President Zelensky traveling to Ankara, to Turkey, meeting with President Erdogan, also saying that the fact that Vladimir Putin did not come and instead sent a junior delegation was a mark of disrespect, not just to Ukraine, but to the United States and Turkey hosting these meetings as well. Clearly, there is now a delay. There is now a smaller negotiating happening. Not high hopes, says Marco Rubio, but nevertheless, he will travel here to meet with the Ukrainian delegation. Those direct talks we expect will happen tomorrow on Friday. We will see what progress is made. There was a hope that history could be made just today. Perhaps progress will be made tomorrow.
That was Alex Kedier reporting from Istanbul. Thank you very much, Alex. This weekend marks an important moment in Central and Eastern Europe, as both Poles and Romanians will be choosing their next president. Far-right Romanian George Simion has made a surprise visit to Poland to show his support for presidential candidate Karol Nawrocki, while Prime Minister Donald Tusk has expressed his support for Simion's opponent, Nicușor Dan. Our chief political correspondent Aaron Damon has this report.
Forget the pro-Donald Trump heartland of America's Midwest. This is southern Poland. The country's right-wing presidential candidate, Karol Nawrocki, joined on the campaign trail by his Romanian counterpart.
George Simiona, George, welcome to Poland, welcome to Zabrze!
It comes as Simeon faces his own battle at home, a decisive final runoff for president this weekend, coinciding with the first round of Poland's election. Both Simeon and Nawrocki are pitching themselves as Trump's disciples in Europe, mulling a potential MAGA alliance while echoing nationalist and Eurosceptic narratives.
Donald Trump is not just a person, he's a symbol of freedom that will cover all the free world.
Romania's race is neck and neck between Simeon and Nicușor Dan, the liberal and pro-EU mayor of Bucharest. A similar battle has emerged in Poland as Nawrocki goes head-to-head with the centrist Warsaw mayor Rafał Trzaskowski, who's led every major poll so far. And as the clock counts down to election day in both countries, Polish Prime Minister Donald Tusk is weighing in.
Two mayors of our beautiful capitals, Bucharest and Warsaw, Nicușor Dan and Rafał Trzaskowski, will fight the same dangers. Aggressive neighbors, foreign agency influence, anti-European populism, corruption and lies. It is evident that you, the voters, and not foreign powers are the ones who must exclusively decide who will become president.
The Romanian vote follows an electoral saga last year when the first round of presidential elections was annulled due to suspected Russian interference. So is the Trumpian turn really a winner? One renowned political scientist isn't so sure.
The story of entering the other people's politics is that you never know how it's going to work. And yes, Romania in a major way was very different. You have basically a political debate where the message coming from the United States was perceived and heard by the people as encouraging, voting for the far right. I don't know what is going to be the impact if the United States is going to interfere in the Polish politics. But in places like Canada and Australia, this is fair to say that basically the Trump effect worked against the interests of the United States.
In Canada and Australia, Liberal governments have recently been re-elected, with some putting it down to an anti-Trump sentiment. Back in Poland, the latest polling snapshot shows the presidential race is heating up. Trzaskowski remains the government-backed frontrunner, campaigning for deeper links with the EU and NATO and in support of women's rights and abortion access, with Nawrocki slowly rising as he imitates Trump's rallying against the old world order.
The question is about mobilization and also about the reliability of the electorates of both sides.
If no candidate achieves a majority on Sunday, the top two, likely to be Trzaskowski and Nawrocki, will head to a final face-off on June 1st. By that time, voters in Romania will already have made their choice. Aaron Darman, TVP World.
For the first time, Warsaw refused to accept illegal migrants who crossed into Germany from Poland. The two Afghan citizens were seeking asylum in Germany and were turned back by the border guard. Despite the incident, bilateral relations appear to be improving. On Wednesday, Chancellor Merz said that Poland will be as an important partner for Berlin as Paris. Marek Steele has more.
Poland's disagreement over Germany's new migration policy has made headlines in German media.
Poland refuses to take back migrants for the first time.
It is hard to assess whether this incident, as you called it, will be a one-time occurrence or will it be a new pattern for the behavior of the Polish border guards.
The incident took place on Monday morning in Guben on the Polish-German border. Two Afghan men crossed into Germany illegally and were detained by the police. They had no IDs but declared their intention to seek asylum in Germany. In theory, their request should be accepted. But in line with the German government's new strategy, the men were to be immediately returned to where they had come from, Poland. Warsaw, however, refused to accept them.
Orderly migration with more limitation, more rejections, more control, more returns. We are not doing it alone nationally. On the contrary, we act in accordance with the European law.
Poland and Germany have disagreed in the past on how to protect their borders from illegal migration, while Germany decided to reintroduce border controls on all crossings with its EU neighbors last year. Warsaw believes that the EU should help member states protect their external borders.
Our concern is and should be to maintain the Schengen area, and I understand the need for reinforced control. But this reinforced control should be dedicated primarily to the external borders of the European Union.
In his policy speech delivered on Wednesday, Friedrich Merz not only said that the EU's external borders should be protected, he also underlined the importance of Berlin's relations with Warsaw.
I'm the first Chancellor of Germany to visit Warsaw on the first day in office. The intent was to send a message that for this government, our big neighbor in the east will play a role just as central as our big neighbor to the west.
The shift in Berlin's policy is not only the result of Tusk and Merz being part of the same political family, the European People's Party.
This situation has been changing because of various factors. One of them is that it's Polish economical growth. The disparity between Polish and German economies is much lower than it was 30 years ago. The other thing is the changing geopolitical security structure in Europe.
Over the past years, Poland has emerged as NATO's largest defense spender per capita and the staunch supporter of Ukraine. Marek Steele, TVP World.
And now on to the latest from the Polish economy. According to Statistics Poland, the country's GDP has grown by more than 3% in the first quarter of 2025. This makes Poland the fastest growing economy in the European Union. Jan Kennedy reports on the state of Polish economy.
After a promising 2024, Central and Eastern Europe's largest economy remained on a strong path of growth, expanding by 3.2% in the first quarter of the year.
So it may well be that Poland is the fastest growing EU country in Q1, also, and certainly the fastest growing large EU country.
Poland's economy grew at more than double the pace of the EU average. Among its regional peers, the Czech Republic recorded a 2% annual increase, Slovakia posted a meagre 0.9% growth, while Hungary's economy stagnated. Polish Finance Minister Andrzej Domański welcomed the figures via a post on X, highlighting increased investment as the main driver of growth.
In the coming quarters, growth is expected to accelerate further, driven primarily by rising investment.
In the following months, however, analysts fear overall investment may decline and will be accompanied by the impacts of a trade war.
One is related to investment, to the fact that it might not be as big of a push as we had assumed, and the second is probably the more important one. It relates to exports and the impacts of the trade war on Polish economy and beyond.
Still, with strong internal demand, Poland's exposure to the trade war fallout will be much weaker compared to other more export-reliant countries in the region.
Within the region, we see Slovakia, Hungary and Czechia as most exposed to the direct negative impact of tariffs, and then the indirect impact will affect the whole region. Poland, in these terms, because it's relatively closed economy compared to Slovakia, Hungary or Czechia.
Strong economic growth has been one of the key factors supporting the strength of the Polish zloty.
I think that there is a widespread anticipation that GDP growth this year will be strong in Poland, so this gives reassurance for those holding zloty assets, and they are not selling out.
What's more, Domański claims that Poland could see growth of above 4% in the whole of 2025, putting it at the forefront of the EU. For TVP World, Jan Kennedy.
Hungary's ruling party Fidesz is facing backlash from the opposition after it introduced a draft bill on foreign-funded NGOs. The proposed law resembles the so-called foreign agents regulations adopted by Russia and aim to control the civil society. Michael van Blauestein reports.
On the transparency in public life. The name of the bill introduced on Tuesday evening in the Hungarian parliament sounds innocent enough. But NGOs and oppositionists in the country are sounding the alarm.
The bill submitted on Tuesday night follows the Russian model. It's about fear of power, revenge and pettiness.
The aim is very clear. They want to further suppress civil society. They want to spread fear. They want people to think that if they start to do something, they will face state prosecution.
Much like in Russia, the Hungarian proposal gives the government almost exclusive power to decide who falls under the scope of the bill. Organizations are framed as a so-called foreign threat and will be required to file comprehensive financial reporting. They even need prior government approval to receive foreign funding. NGOs faced stiff fines and forced dissolution if they don't comply with the government's demands. Critically, the avenues to successfully appeal the decision are limited to none.
It covers also any type of revenue that an organization could receive from abroad. And this could, of course, be subscription fees for media outlets. It could be cross-border donations from private individuals. It could also be institutional grants from the European Union's own budget.
It remains unlikely that the Hungarian parliament will amend the proposal in any meaningful way, as the governing party, Fidesz, holds a large majority.
European Union action is really important. It has proven to be important in trying to safeguard democracy and rule of law and civil society space in Hungary. But very often EU action is slow or quite cumbersome to trigger.
Other recent measures by the Hungarian government include banning LGBTQ pride events and making it easier for authorities to crack down on demonstrations. According to opinion polls, Prime Minister Viktor Orbán's Fidesz party is now trailing the opposition party TISA, led by Péter Magyar. The question observers keep asking is whether the next parliamentary elections in 2026 will be free and fair.
Russia has downplayed the importance of Istanbul peace talks by sending a low-level delegation. Meanwhile, Moscow shows muscle in the Baltic region, violating Estonia's airspace and indirectly admitting that the Shadow Fleet indeed belongs to Russia. And to talk about it and more, we're joined by Martin Sklana, former Slovakian defense minister. Good evening.
Good evening.
So while Russia declares it is ready to negotiate, it is also rising tensions on NATO's eastern flank. Moscow fighter jet has violated Estonia's airspace, while the Estonians were escorting one of Russia's Shadow Fleet vessels out of the territorial waters. Now, is this a pure coincidence that such a situation occurred shortly before the planned meeting in Istanbul?
Well, it's difficult to say whether those are connected. What is for certain is that Russia's reaction with the fighter plane was a direct reaction to the Estonian authorities escorting the Shadow Fleet ship into waters that are less dangerous for it to operate near Estonia, which basically, and as you said, confirms that Russia is using the Shadow Fleet as one of its tools and wants to protect it, and wants also to send a signal to the Baltic countries that it's ready to defend it and create situations in which it hopes the tensions will lead to some kind of incident that it can misuse then later on.
Right, so this was sort of Russia's response. Well, it seems to be the first time that Moscow is taking a direct action towards a Shadow Fleet vessel. Now, what will be the consequences of it? How will the EU and NATO react in the future?
For certain, this requires that a reaction is there every time a ship from the Ghost Fleet looks like violating, sovereignty or basically waters of the countries in the Baltic Sea. Ships in the Baltic Sea and traffic in the Baltic Sea in recent times is very sensitive due to also other incidents on critical infrastructure, on undersea cables. So it is very much a situation in which every country wants to pay a lot of attention to everything that is going on. And Russia knows this and is trying to play on this and play with this card to see how the situation can be and whether it can be escalated to a point where Russia can misuse it.
Now, from the Baltic region, let's move to Turkey. Czech Foreign Minister Jan Lipavsky calls Vladimir Putin's absence in Istanbul a cowardice. Do you agree with him? What could Putin be afraid of in Istanbul?
Well, he could be afraid of actually talking to Zelensky and looking like the one who doesn't want to end the war, which he does anyway. So I guess that has a big say in his decision whether or not he will be coming to Turkey. But also from this decision of Putin, it is very obvious that the only partner that he wants to talk to is Donald Trump. But if you talk. If you want to solve a situation between Ukraine and Russia, those are the countries who should be involved. I mean, Donald Trump can only do as much as facilitating these kind of discussions, but obviously Putin wants something else rather than Ukraine.
Now, before I ask you about Donald Trump personally, I'd like to ask you about his man. So, Estonian foreign minister says the low-level Russian delegation is a slap in the face. But do Americans see it the same way?
Well, the Americans certainly are not happy about the situation, since Marco Rubio should be also attending this meeting, which means that not even the U.S. delegation has been met from the Russian side, despite the interest in meeting President Trump. So this is let's call it undiplomatic, but also it's certainly an argument for the Ukrainian side and the U.S. side in making in understanding that the Russian side is certainly not very very eager to make this a quick negotiation, to stop the war quickly now and get to a solution, to a discussion about solutions in Ukraine.
Right. The deadline for Russia's response to the Western ceasefire proposal, that was not that long ago. We may have already forgotten, was on Monday. Now, will the sanctions come into effect?
They should. It should be clear that Russia is now very obviously the part in this discussion that doesn't really want to move into peace negotiations and find ways how to actually stop the fighting, come to a ceasefire, negotiate, and come to a just and sustainable peace. So that should be obvious. And the strategy has always been to put Russia in a position where it's ready to negotiate. There should be economic pressure in the form of sanctions. So there should be more sanctions coming.
Now, as I have already announced, let's discuss Donald Trump. And before we do so, let's listen to the US president.
Nothing's going to happen until Putin and I get together, okay? And obviously he wasn't going to go. He was going to go, but he thought I was going to go. He wasn't going if I wasn't there. And I don't believe anything's going to happen, whether you like it or not, until he and I get together. But we're going to have to get it solved because too many people are dying.
Now, the question here is, has Donald Trump torpedoed the meeting himself by refusing to attend it?
Well, that might be one point of view. The other is that Russia and Vladimir Putin are looking to solve any kind of situation, just like Ukraine, anywhere in the world, by talking to the US. This is what Russia wants. They want to be on par with the United States, which they don't deserve and frankly do not have really the power to be in that same position. But somehow they want to force it to come to this level. It's unfortunate that the US president either doesn't see it or wants to play this game with Russia and with Vladimir Putin, where he wants to give him the credit of discussing these kind of issues that are certainly there have to be solved by the countries involved, by Russia and Ukraine in this case, and should not be solved by others over the heads of Ukrainians or potentially other countries. From history, many countries in Europe have the same experience where other countries have decided about the fate of their populations and of their territories, and this is something that many of us don't want to see come back.
So will there ever be a Putin-Zelensky meeting?
Well, this is to be seen. If Russia really wants to find a way how to stop this and discuss, there needs to be a meeting between Zelensky and Putin, either in the presence of US representatives or without it. But if they mean it seriously, they have to come to the table.
And what are your expectations regarding the rather low-key talks between Russia and Ukraine?
Well, those are important. They can find possibilities of what are the issues that actually need to be discussed once negotiations will be held between Russia and Ukraine. But as it looks now, the most important for Russia is to get a negotiation not with Ukraine but with the United States. And this is something that also points to the fact that there is more for Russia. There's other interests for Russia to discuss with the US, like the sanctions, like economic survival. Basically, if they stop the war, their economy will probably collapse since it is so much focused on the war economy, and they need the US to help them deal with that situation.
Well, the guns still fire on Ukrainian battlefields. What are your scenarios for the next few weeks and, if not months?
From what it looks like right now, Russia does not really look like wanting to negotiate about stopping the war. So that tells us that they are obviously pursuing their military objectives in Ukraine. And we can see that they are trying to gain as much ground as possible in the time when everybody else is focusing on the negotiations. So I would expect that from Russia's side, the military activity will continue to reach as far as possible into the other parts of, the most of West in Ukraine as they can, to get also in a position for negotiations about other regions than the ones they are currently claiming.
Martin Sklenar, former Slovakian defense minister, was our guest this evening. Thank you very much.
Thank you for having me.
And thank you for watching, and stay with us for more news and features here on TVP World.